Hey there, and welcome to episode 30 of the Simply Great Relationships podcast. We're so glad you could join us today. I'm Meredith Silversmith, and this is Marina Varon. And today we're talking about how to decide if you're ready for kids. We're going to be covering, is there a right time to have a baby? What makes it hard to have the baby talk, especially when everyone around you says it's time? How to explore your individual feelings around this decision, and then how to collaborate with your partner on this decision, because that's really important as well. So make sure you stay with us until the very end, because we've got a great bonus for you, and we're going to tell you how to get it. So Marina, dear Marina, is there a right time to have a baby, in your opinion?
I wish the answer was yes. I know some of you may have noticed that we took a little bit of a hiatus in January. And that is because I had a baby.
You did.
So this is definitely a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And I think I understand it on a new level now. But I think a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today are things George and I did that I think really, really helped us with this transition. But yeah, I had a baby boy named Lev who you've met, and he's great. So we had a little bit of a break because I needed to do mom stuff.
Definitely.
And back to the question in terms of, is there such a thing as the right time or a perfect time? I can tell you no such thing. I think there will always be something that comes up. And if you're waiting for like that spot in your calendar where you're going to say, well, I have these 9 months and then after that I have this chunk of time, that's not going to happen. And I think I can speak for myself, and then I can speak from experience with other women that I've coached through this and other couples that I've coached through this. If you're going to try to lock it down like that, you're only going to set yourself up for more stress because what you're really doing is projecting an expectation onto a timeline that is very, very, very most likely not going to come to fruition.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think the reality is no one's ever really ready. Like, you think you're ready, or maybe you think you're not ready, but you're never going to be 100% ready. You can put in your best efforts to be emotionally ready, mentally ready, physically healthy, right? Get yourself as an individual and then your relationship into the best place it can be in preparation. But that's pretty much all you can do. And the rest is up to the universe's decision, yeah?
Yeah, sure. But I think you can't underestimate the value of the things you can do preemptively in terms of getting to that good place emotionally, mentally, and physically. However, it is probably the biggest transition you're going to navigate as a human being. So to expect, I know exactly what this is going to go like, and I'm going to have all this control over it is a little bit setting yourself up for failure. I think a big part of actually knowing you're getting closer to the right time is that accepting that belief that you're not going to have total control.
Yeah.
And that things are going to come up, and that there's going to be a lot of uncertainty and a huge learning curve that you go through, and that's okay. As long as you feel like your relationship is your backbone and there is that resilience and flexibility in it to navigate such a transition.
Yeah, makes sense. What do you think makes it so hard for couples to talk about this topic? Because I do think, it's almost it kind of becomes like a taboo topic. Like I've had couples that I've met with where when I do my individual sessions, one partner will sometimes bring it up and be like, oh, but we can't talk about that, or we don't talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. Like I've had that also quite a bit. It seems like it's a really loaded topic for a lot of couples. I think there can be like a lot of fear
Mm-hmm.
around it. And I think the fear can come from different places. I think one big thing is like having a baby, people equate that mentally to like, and I'm giving up my fun, responsibility free, childless life.
Mm-hmm.
Am I ready for that transition when chronologically I'm supposed to be?
Mm.
So I think like, let me avoid the conversation.
Yeah.
That will be easier than like facing that
Mm-hmm.
as a reality. Um, what are some things that you've seen?
I think some couples, and they may not even realize it until we sort of bring it out, but there's this fear of the relationship changing. So
Yeah.
either they're really happy with how the relationship is and they don't want that to change, or maybe they're even not thrilled with how the relationship is right now and they're fearful of what will happen if they do bring a baby into that situation.
Yeah, sure. And that makes a lot of sense. Again, like having a baby is a huge transition.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just to add to that, there's like this sense of vulnerability and questioning the integrity of the relationship when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to having the baby talk. And I think that's where some feelings come up for people and questioning like, will we make it through parenthood? Like, are we strong enough as a couple? Are we strong enough? Am I strong enough and resilient enough as an individual? Uh, will we be good at it together? Like,
Mm-hmm.
will we be a good team, even if one person feels ready or, like ready to take on that responsibility?
Mm-hmm.
It's also questioning the dynamic because you're bringing a baby and not just for yourself, you're bringing it into a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like those questions can be so scary for people because they really touch on such vulnerable points. It's like, are we going to be good at this thing that's really hard and scary and uncertain?
Yeah.
And there is no answer, right? Like, there is no way to look ahead. There's no assessment you can take or that's really gonna like give you a definitive yes you are. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think
And
that brings up a lot of fear.
yeah, and just hearing you talk about that, I think if like some of that is resonating with a listener or a viewer, that you can go back to our episode on vulnerability. I don't know the number, but we'll link it in the show notes. That I know it's called talking about the scary stuff, because that
Mm-hmm.
can help you sort of get into this topic a little bit more with your partner. But the reality is, everything we've touched on so far, all the worries and the fears, are totally normal.
Mm-hmm.
So, in saying that, these fears, can easily paralyze people, but they shouldn't necessarily, because these are normal fears and normal anxieties in making this decision.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately the social narrative is you should be super thrilled and super excited to take on this journey. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where a lot of this questioning comes from. Um, and I think people are really like, they feel like, oh, something's like wrong with me that I'm not just like a glowing at changing my life completely.
Yeah.
like, uh, and I think it's really important to accept like this is normal. We hear it from pretty much every couple I've seen transition to parenthood.
Mm-hmm.
This has come up. I've never worked with a couple that's like, we're so ready. We're
Mm-hmm.
on the same page. Everything's going to be great. We're not fearful at all. Like,
Yeah.
but I think like society tells you that this is how you should feel. And I'm just going to call a little bit of bullshit on that.
Mm-hmm. And it's not unlike the decision to get married.
Mm-hmm.
It's again, like, I should be so happy, I should be so excited, there should be no stress, all these shoulds. And
Yeah.
then, our relationship we should be soulmates, he should just know, like, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And, is that a reason to not get married? No. Are you ever going to attain that level of excitement and like reach that bar? Probably not if you're based in reality.
Yeah.
So I always think of it that way. Like try to find past experiences where you set the bar kind of high, and did you get through it, and was it necessary to get there, and like did the world collapse when you did it anyway? Probably not.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And to kind of add to that, there is that social, like greater societal social pressure. But there's also like a lot of what makes the conversation hard to have is also feeling that overwhelming pressure from the like stakeholders, parents, grandparents, siblings, friends, that can make the conversation really hard because I think what happens is all these stakeholders they take away the decision from you.
Yeah.
It feels like it's more their decision than yours.
Yeah, and you really got to remember that it's not their decision, right? So if you move forward, they're not going to be the ones living with the baby. They're not going to be the ones, changing their whole life and 24/7 on duty, and shifting their relationship and creating a new type of partnership. They want that for you or for them for their own reasons, right? We talk sometimes about like different people's buckets, like their stuff that they're bringing with them. So if you've got your parent, your mom or your dad saying to you like, when are you going to give me a grandchild? I want that. That's probably coming from a need that they have, not necessarily something that you're doing wrong or that you should be doing differently.
And them being a grandparent is a very different role than you being a parent, right? And I think that's really important to also stay very aware of, that their wants come from a very different place than yours.
Yeah.
And it's okay for them to have that want. They're allowed to want grandchildren. It doesn't mean you have to meet their every want, but you can have that conversation. I mean, if you have that relationship with your parents, I think that's a beautiful conversation to have.
Yeah, definitely. And even if you think of friends, I know we talk about that a lot, where, people will have certain circles of friends and it feels like everybody's doing this, right? Everybody got married, everybody's having babies. And that can create some sort of pressure, and again, that's probably more the indirect pressure, right? Your parent or a family member asking you directly, when are you going to do this, is one thing. But the indirect pressure of like your social group or the people that you spend time with all making that decision, again, really evaluate where your thoughts are coming from. Is it I want to fit in, or I feel left out, or I feel disconnected? Is it something within you? Because then that's a you thing that you want to tackle first, versus I really want this because, I want to raise a child, or I want to be, in partnership with my spouse and be parents together. You got to really think through what's driving that motivation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy you touched on that because I had a fairly young couple that I was working with where she brought up the child conversation. It really startled him. And when we did some work and I asked her kind of what was the impetus to bringing the conversation up, she said, my Facebook feed is all friends' pictures with their babies.
Oh.
And I said, so what?
Yeah.
And, it was so much. And like, she didn't even realize, that she was really absorbing that like social media indirect pressure. And it was influencing her like to that level. And when we really like hashed through it, they were like, no, we want to enjoy married life. They had just gotten married. And their whole plan was to like really take a couple of years and enjoy married life because they had finished school, and like this was their first kind of opportunity to really do the things they wanted. And they had this really great list of like places they wanted to travel and things they wanted to do and things they wanted to experience before having kids, because they did have that conversation before getting married, which was wonderful. And then it kind of got sidetracked by Facebook, by social media. Don't give it that much power, right? Like, that's always my message. Don't give social media that much power, because you're seeing somebody's redacted, curated life.
Yeah.
You're not seeing them pull their hair out in the middle of the night when their baby won't stop screaming. You're seeing professional photos of their baby looking like a little angel. And sure, it's allowed to stir up some feelings in you, but it doesn't necessarily mean that just because all your high school friends are doing it, that it's time or the right decision for you right now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. It's very powerful. I mean, in thinking along those lines of having to decide for yourself, some questions to ask, and as I'm thinking of these questions, they can be really tough. They sound straightforward, but these are some real deal questions, right? Do I want kids?
That's a super hard question for a lot of people. I mean, I've seen that one really bring up a lot of emotions, because I think up until recently, like, we weren't even allowed to ask ourselves that question. Like, if you got married, you signed a contract saying, yes, my next step is I want kids. But I think you're allowed to ask yourself that question.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, do we want kids, right? Because it's not just you necessarily, it's you and your partner. So do we both want kids? Because let me tell you what's a really not great time to bring a baby into the mix is when one of you wants one and one of you doesn't or isn't sure. That's something that's got to be worked out and talked through and resolved before you take that step.
Definitely. And I think the last question that's really, really important in terms of asking and doing this work for yourself is my partner who I envision as my co-parent? I think, like, again, there's been this kind of expectation of the person you married, that's it, you have a kid and white picket fence, live in the suburbs, but there's so much more opportunity, and there's, like, we're coming to a place where we're allowed to accept all different kinds of relationships now, where, like, you don't necessarily have to have kids. And the reality is, if you may not see your partner as someone that you're able to co-parent with, but you do have a wonderful relationship, co-parenting or raising children may not be at the center of your relationship.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And the loss your mom will go through by not having grandchildren is your mom's work, not yours.
Yeah. So those are some tough questions, but important questions.
Yeah.
No, I was going to just say, like, how would you recommend going through the process of exploring, like, your own feelings? Like, how would we start looking at this as an individual?
So I think it's really important to kind of know your stuff. What stuff are you holding onto from your childhood, from your family of origin, that is one kind of like building your ideas and beliefs around what parenthood is, what bringing a child into this world is, but like, what's overwhelming about being a parent? How were you parented? How did you see your parents? What was their journey like? What are the triggers around that for you?
Definitely. And then, once you get a sense of those answers, how does that translate into you as a parent? Right? So do I see myself being able to be the kind of parent that I want to be? You know,
Mm-hmm.
where's the gap, right? Like, where am I now? Where do I want to be? And what's that gap? How do
Mm-hmm.
I fulfill that gap? How do I make the jump, right? Like, what work do I need to do as an individual? What work
Mm-hmm.
do, I need to collaborate with my partner on? Things like that are really important.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also about like, do I see myself as being capable of being the kind of parent I want to be in terms of like I need to accept that I am the person I am, right? Like you're
Mm-hmm.
not going to transform overnight and all of a sudden like go to the gym at 6 a.m. and cook every meal at home and
Mm-hmm.
do all these things you've never done before. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
do I understand my limitations around this? Like, do I
Mm.
understand that I'm not going to transform into like Gwyneth Paltrow level, health guru, if
Mm-hmm.
that's something that you envision as being important, if right now you're eating fast food for every meal. Like
Yeah.
that might be like a bit too wide a gap. I think it's kind of like realizing that you can make behavioral changes, but you're not going to change who you are at your core. And
Mm-hmm.
if that gap is like a little too much of a fill, like do you need to reel your expectations in a bit?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. And then, you're looking at yourself, you're evaluating where you're at and what your experiences have been, and then you need to take a look at your relationship and
Mm-hmm.
consider, what does my relationship need to look like in order for us to feel secure in it and feel like we're ready to bring a baby into the mix.
Mm-hmm. And these are really hard questions. And I think like a lot of couples um, come to us like way after the fact
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't go through these questions or because maybe they like thought about it, really hard feelings came up,
Yep.
and sometimes we don't know what to do with that emotional flooding. And I think like taking a little bit of the like preventative medicine type coaching
Mm-hmm.
can really do wonders in terms of just processing through these.
Yeah, and I mean, life is life, right? Things happen. We see a lot of couples who didn't even have the opportunity to have these questions, right? Or go through this process because the baby just came.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know, and I think that that's a really challenging situation for a lot of reasons, but like those couples I like want to connect with, and I find I do connect with, like they sort of find us, but even more because they're in it already. Like
Mm-hmm.
the decision has been made, so
Yeah.
we need to sort of jump backwards and go through this process and get you on the same page, having a plan, being ready,
Mm-hmm.
like having as many tools at your disposal as possible, because it might be a little more challenging when it wasn't necessarily a planned and intentional decision.
Mm-hmm. Oh, but I love like seeing that transformation. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
like thinking of this couple right now, and I just like
Yeah.
loved seeing that transformation because they had a bit of a surprise baby and they really weren't on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
And when it clicked,
Yep.
like when it that moment happened and it
Mm-hmm.
really clicked for them, like we are in it, we have to accept this and start using our tools. It
Right.
was just like such a powerful transformation and it just like
Mm-hmm.
shifted, like something just shifted so well for them
Yeah.
and it just started going so nicely and smoothly
Mm-hmm.
for them. And it was like a pretty quick process also. So
Yeah. I feel like a lot of stuff with couples in general, it's not that anyone's so far off the mark, it's that we feel like we're so far off the mark. So
mhm.
sometimes even just knowing that you're not, and knowing that if you just tweak this and that and communicate in this way, it'll bring you back to that goal and that like how you want your relationship to feel, is so
Mhm.
like relieves so much anxiety and just helps sort of put the weapons down, and like you don't
Yeah.
have to be at battle, you just need to make some tweaks. I find that that's probably one of the biggest change factors.
Yeah, and it's our favorite thing. It's the small investments, big
Mm-hmm.
rewards.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when couples find that out, it's like, oh, mind blown. Like I don't
Mm-hmm.
have to completely change my life around. I
Mm-hmm.
just have to like say the things I want to say, like just a little bit differently.
Yep, definitely. And
Uh,
I mean, so what you want from your relationship, right? We kind of touched on it, being on the same page, having a plan, right? Like having a game plan,
mhm,
being emotionally supportive of one another is really,
mhm,
really key. Um, and having a shared vision, right? What do we want this to look like? How do we
mhm,
want to be as parents? Those are probably
mhm.
the really core areas to focus on.
Yeah, and to just to go with shared vision, it's like I think one of my favorite exercises with couples is not just like what do we want this to look like, but how do we make that happen for each other? How do we utilize each other as uh, accountability partners and as supports to
Mm-hmm.
stay on track with that,
Mm-hmm.
so that you realize that you have this really valuable asset in your relationship, that you're not like two eyes,
Mm-hmm.
that you're a we, like we talked about in our previous episode, and that we has this like built-in wonderful support system that you're allowed to utilize
Mm-hmm.
to your advantage,
Mm-hmm.
especially during a time of transition.
Yeah, that's a really good point. How would you recommend couples start with this? So, starting this process of collaborating with their partner on the transition.
Well, I love me my communication tip sheet. I think that learning and being able to talk about it without it being like a super heated taboo topic that
Mm-hmm.
goes from 0 to 60 like this is probably the biggest thing you can do.
Yeah.
So go back to episode 1, listen to it if you haven't already. So, so important. And download the communication tip sheet. We're going to link it down below.
Mm-hmm.
And really, really stick to those guidelines
Yeah.
in having this conversation, because I am willing to bet huge money on the fact that you probably haven't been using those tools in having these conversations, and you're hitting a wall or you're talking not so nicely to each other because this is such an emotionally charged topic. So, my first thing is start having the conversation in a different way, and
Yeah.
in a way that's focused on collaboration and understanding,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to like, what is our resolution? When are we going to start trying? This is
Yeah.
when we're going to have a baby. This is
Mm-hmm.
how it's going to be, right?
Yeah, and I think don't think that you're gonna come to a decision in one conversation, right? Like if this is a marathon, not a sprint. Don't think you're gonna sit down to be like, okay, today we're deciding.
Yes,
It's a process.
definitely. I mean, I can tell you with George and myself, like we started having the conversation like way back when, but
Mm-hmm.
we started having the conversation like kind of knowing that we're not ready,
Mm.
just to have the conversation on the table. Because I think if you start doing that, like when it is on the table, it feels like a lot less overwhelming because it's already been on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's just kind of shifting the tune to, we know we want this and we're not ready, to, we know we want this, what do we need to look for as like signs of readiness,
Mm-hmm.
to, we know we want this and now we're ready, so what do we need to do to support each other and plan for it. But really for us, so this is kind of like a little bit funny because both of us are trained facilitators in this really nice um, research-based curriculum for transitioning couples from being a couple to parenthood, and it's really, really great. And during my pregnancy, I was working a lot, and George and I kind of, he was working a lot, and George and I were kind of like really overwhelmed with everything that had to be done with work and with the
Mm-hmm.
baby coming and with all kinds of things. And one day I was like, I'm just going to pull out the binder.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do it. I'm going to pull out the binder and I'm going to facilitate this for ourselves. And of course, we like tweaked it to really
Yeah.
kind of fit our needs, but just like setting that intention, being intentional about it, and going through that transition to parenthood coaching curriculum with him was such a beautiful bonding experience and like really helped us get on the same page and kind of like gave us a light at the end of the tunnel
Mm-hmm.
that like there is a lot of uncertainty and you just have to accept it and it's okay, and just like really nice ways to bond with our baby and really nice ways to kind of just reduce the overwhelm, because in the beginning it's just very overwhelming, but
Mm-hmm.
really nice ways to reduce the overwhelm and be there for each other and be really supportive. And I think that was a huge help.
Yeah.
And sometimes like you don't connect. You're like, oh, this is what I do. I should do it for myself. And I had that moment where I
Yeah.
connected and it's great.
That's
Uh,
good. I love that. So you made it an intentional process. You sat down
sure
and you
did.
used the curriculum from that course, which is, I think that's great. And I know what you and I would recommend, and I feel like this is probably in line with what you and George did, was like exploring your individual needs, what you wish for, what you desire, and like communicate that to your partner so that you
Mm-hmm.
have the opportunity to actually fulfill each other's needs when the time comes.
Mm-hmm. And also like highlighting where you're aligned. I mean, I know that we really talk about this a lot, and we talk about this a lot for a reason, because
Mm-hmm.
this is such a foundational thing. And this is like what gets you to feel like allies, not adversaries, is where are you aligned?
Mm-hmm.
Where are you already agreeing? Build on that.
Mm-hmm.
Highlight the similarities, not the differences.
Yeah.
Like give that the fuel and the attention. How can you build on those?
Yeah.
How,
Absolutely. And then when you do have areas of disagreements, knowing how to handle it, right? So you probably will have certain areas where you disagree. So the goal is not to persuade your partner to your side or to end the relationship because you disagree on something that's not, earth shattering. It's compromising. So compromise either means, I'm going to bend, you're going to bend, and we're going to meet somewhere in the middle, or I'm going to maintain my position, I'm going to maintain my position, and we're both going to accept that and be
Mhm.
okay with it. So that can be challenging, and we devoted a whole episode to this back quite a few weeks ago. It was episode 12, how to agree to disagree. So
Mhm.
if you find yourself getting stuck on one point, go back, listen to that episode, download the freebie, because that's going to help you navigate that more successfully.
Mhm. Another one I think is really helpful here is how to get your partner to support your life streams. I believe that's
Mm-hmm.
episode 15. There's a great bonus there about creating this shared vision, and this is essentially what you're doing. You're creating a shared vision for parenthood.
Yeah.
And it's important to start from that level and for it to kind of feel good in terms of expanding on where you agree and where you are similar and how you are, on the same page already with certain things.
Yeah. So, and I would say as a final suggestion, we did make it even easier for you guys, and we created the bonus for this week, which is the Transition to Parenthood Prep Guide, which sort of takes pieces of everything but tailors it to the transition to parenthood, and we put it together in one document for you so you can review it, talk through it. There's guided questions, and you, by the end, will have created a shared vision for parenthood, which is really great. So I
Mm-hmm.
definitely recommend getting that. You can get it on our website at simplygreatrelationships.com/030.
I will say this. This is a really loaded and big topic. So if you've started this conversation and it hasn't gone as planned, which for a lot of couples it doesn't because it's a really, really loaded topic,
Mm-hmm.
or you keep hitting the same wall over and over again when you are having this conversation and both of you are just leaving frustrated and it's becoming more and more of an issue, which again, totally normal, happens for a lot of couples. Uh, we offer an individualized transition to parenthood coaching from a research based model. This is what George and I went through. We've taken lots of couples through this. It's extremely valuable, really helps get you on the same page. John Gottman, we love him. We quote him all the time. I'm going to butcher this quote, so I'll just give you the gist. The gist of it is that the best gift you can give your child is a strong parental relationship, right?
Mm.
Going through something like this is kind of like purchasing insurance for doing that. Like you're setting yourself up for success as partners to navigate this transition into parenthood. So, send us an email, info@simplygreatrelationship.com, or you can text us, you can call us. The number is 914-440-8414, or you can visit our website, simplygreatrelationships.com, and submit a request there and see if we're a good fit to work together and take you through this transition, because we've helped couples through this. And like I said, like I love that moment when you see it shift and
Yeah.
how different the relationship starts to feel.
Yeah, and I think, it's great for couples who are considering transitioning to parenthood or starting to try to have a child. It's great for couples who are expecting. And it's really great for couples who have already had their baby and are maybe
Mm-hmm.
finding it a little rocky or a little more challenging than they'd hoped for. You can absolutely go back and reset and
Mm-hmm.
put the expectations out there. So I don't want you to feel like, oh, well, we already had our baby, or, oh, well, it doesn't work like that. This is great for any phase, around that transition.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your takeaways today, Marina? What's your top takeaway?
So my top takeaway is that, just like you just said, like it's never too late. Like if you've already had a baby, you can still transition your relationship to a really good place.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you've had a baby and you're struggling to get to a good place, like it's just that you haven't gone through the transition yet, and
Mm-hmm.
you can still do that.
Yeah.
Like the opportunity to get on the same page is there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about for you?
I think just reinforcing the clarity around what's my stuff, what's their stuff, right? So like we as individuals and as couples have to be responsible for our own needs, our own relationships, like what we want, what we don't want. And the direct or indirect pressure we get from outside does not necessarily or does not make us responsible for meeting that pressure. It makes us responsible for identifying it and setting a boundary or having a conversation and then, collaborating with our partner to achieve our needs and wants. I think that's really
Mm-hmm.
important.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I feel like we covered a lot today.
I think so. This is a big topic.
Yeah, it really is. And we just kind of touched the tip of the iceberg here. So, I don't know. That's all for today. We hope you start applying this, if this is relevant to the phase of life you're in right now. Definitely download the bonus, reach out to us. We'd love for you to continue the conversation in our Facebook group where we're going to be providing extra tips, tricks, and live streams exclusively for our members. You can find the group at facebook.com/groups/simplygreatrelationships or click the link on our website, simplygreatrelationships.com. Yeah, and until next time, we'll see ya. Bye.
Bye.